Good evening. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome to Talking Point. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us on Hilaal TV, DSTV channel 347. This coming weekend will be the National Convention, which will, of course, kickstart the much anticipated national dialogue. Well, it was supposed to have all of the hype, but as you have seen, that various legacy foundations have withdrawn from this upcoming event, which will be taking place at UNISA this weekend. The Steve Biko Foundation, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the Chief Albert Luthuli Foundation, Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation, and also the F.W. de Klerk Foundation have all pulled out. We've also seen political parties pulling out. Some have announced it as early as 2 months ago. And where does it leave South Africa now in terms of this national dialogue? It's meant to be the dialogue that will fix South Africa's ills that we've experienced in the last 31 years. Joining me to take this discussion forward, I'd like to welcome with me in studio Dr. Percy Mahlati, who is the Secretary of the Strategic Dialogue Group. And joining me online, I'd like to welcome Jobson, who is the CEO of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation. Thank you very much for joining us here today on Talking Point. I'm going to start off with you, Janet. When we see, of course, the statement that was pulled out as part of the collective for the legacy foundations, how important was it that this message had to be delivered 1 week before the convention started?
I think it's really important to understand that that statement and the action of withdrawing really came at the end of a much longer process of consultation, of us engaging with the rest of the preparatory task team, having facilitated meetings, engaging with the president, engaging with the eminent persons group, really making our case on every level that essentially the principles that the national dialogue is meant to uphold and be centered around were being undermined. And so by last Friday, we just felt there was no other option but to withdraw because we could not endorse the quality of the planned convention. We didn't feel that it had been organized in a way that was citizen-led. We didn't feel that there was full transparency and accountability over the financing. And we're really concerned that it won't be a meaningful platform to really engage in dialogue that sets the national dialogue as a total process off on the right foot. And so that's unfortunately where we found ourselves. It was the only option we felt we had by last week Friday.
Dr. Mahlati, I want to bring you into this conversation. Just your response, your comments with regards to that, because of course you lead the Strategic Dialogue Group, a very important component in this national dialogue. Your organization will not be part of this weekend's national convention. Explain to us the reasoning why.
Yeah, you see, it's important to take a step back. We've been in this process with the legacy foundations since May, June last year. A lot of work has gone in, and the reason that as the Strategic Dialogue Group we decided to join the Legacy Foundation is because we were sold to the idea and authenticity that says for the first time in this country, let ordinary citizens be part of envisioning a future. So it was important then that, we actually stick to that principle. We've worked very hard, contributed, and really formed a very good, solid team with the foundations. And their message resonated with society. To an extent that there was engagement, with the emissaries of the head of state. We agreed on a document of principles that was going to guide, our engagements. And like Janet is saying, there were frustrations along the way that I must say that the leadership of the foundations has been very, very, what can I say, patient.
Yes.
Engaging right up to on the 30th of July, writing a letter to the president and saying, Mr. President, here are the challenges. We would like that this be. Of course, there was no response. until, where the foundations themselves actually felt that the difficulties that were being experienced within the preparatory task team, there was need for an independent facilitator. Independent facilitator came, there was engagements, and everybody left there laughing, hugging, hoping that everything is fine. But lo and behold, following day, there is now, following day, then we actually discovered that, the same people we thought that there was agreement with were now disputing what was there. Besides that, the foundations decided to send the chair and deputy chair to engage with the president.
That's of the eminent persons group?
No. Of the preparatory task team.
Yes.
They engage with the president. The president says, no, I hear you, I hear what you're saying, but we go ahead, irrespective. So the big challenge really is that you cannot get foundations that, have communicated a mechanism to correct the wrongs in the country, to then join the wrong that is being done. Yes. The president has said in public, the national dialogue will neither be government-led nor government, organized. However, what we see now is a total takeover of government, or of the national dialogue by government. Now the question to ask, with all these steps that have been followed, from, what I'm saying and what Janet is saying, what should the foundations do? When they've gone to the head of state and actually said, we've got a problem. The way this convention is organized is at odds with your pronouncements that it will be a pure citizen-led process. And the president says, no, it goes ahead anyway. So I think it's a serious, serious challenge. It's very important to stick to principle, because if you are going to be wavering on principles, then there will be a problem.
Janet, do you feel this was a complete lack of principles? Patience. Dr. Mahlati mentions patience, and it's quite clear that government in itself has not really been patient in terms of saying, well, let's hold on. We don't have to do it this coming weekend from the 15th to the 16th. We could have maybe, if I stand to be correct, that the proposed dates by the Legacy Foundations was around October. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think we really felt that we'd communicated strongly that the principles were being undermined. I'll give you an example. We all know that UNISA is holding the convention this weekend, and we requested a simple letter from UNISA detailing exactly what commitments they were making so that we understood what their commitments were. And we didn't receive any communication from UNISA. We asked for the presidency to just write us a letter detailing what is the budget they're committing, what are they committing to sponsoring. We couldn't get any information out of them. And so we were faced with government officials saying, trust us, just trust us, it's going to be fine. And unfortunately, as Dr. Mahlati said, there's a trust deficit. And so for us, we really felt we need detail. We need to ensure the intentions are clear. We need to ensure that everything is above board. And I think I think we're very committed to the idea of a national dialogue. We're very committed to the possibility it holds for every South African to finally feel like their voice matters and to be in conversation with each other in a way that has the potential to transform something. But if that's going to be the case, it has to be really owned and led by citizens themselves. And in a sense, the president failed at the first hurdle of it being citizen-led, because he had the opinion of the foundations on the table, and he had his date of the 15th of August. And instead of choosing the citizen's perspective, he chose his own perspective. And so really that was a failure at the first hurdle of tension between government-owned and led versus citizen-led, and went with government-owned and led for really an arbitrary date. I mean, the 15th of August holds no specific purpose that it needed to be the 15th of August. And that's why we said, let's give it 2 more months. Let's resource NEDLAC appropriately. Let's get all of the budgetary aspects in place effectively. Let's make sure the program is deeply meaningful and really sets out a plan for the rest of the national dialogue that's powerful. And we just could not stand by and watch all of that be eroded. I think we really felt very stuck in a difficult situation.
And we are going to touch on, whether this is in the next segment, whether this is, citizen-led or government-led. I've got 1 minute, Dr. Mahlati. I had a chat on another show called News in Focus with Musi Maimane, who sits as the chairperson of the Standing Appropriation Committees. And his biggest question, and of course he's written to Parliament to ask, what is the costing? We need the costing from the president. And that's been the grey area, hasn't it, when it's come to government-led events, that there isn't really a sense of transparency when it comes to using the taxpayers' money. And every citizen has the right to ask that question. What is going to happen with our taxpayer, our money that is being spent on government?
Yeah, look, a lot of work had been done on the modeling as to what it would go, making comparisons and all that. Janet would be able to can actually share that. But there'd be no definitive figure that says this is how much the budget is going to be. All that was required from government is just the kick-off, funds, so that then the processes, the logistics can actually start. But as you would know, look, I don't know much about finances. All I know is to inject people. But the most important thing is that for any project, especially a project of this magnitude, you can't go blind into it.
Yes,
You've got to know how much. I mean, there were statements that were coming up that, no, the budget would be decided after the first convention. That's very, very serious statement, because then it means anything can happen.
That's a gamble being taken.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But also, what confidence are you giving to South Africans that both the budgeting and the spending is going to be above board? When right up front you fail to say, even in indicative terms, that this is so much, that would be spent. So that was a really, really big problem. But over and above that, I think the principle of it being a citizen-led process was lost. Because you've got government taking over, even the advertising has got government emblems and all that. Now that creates a problem, because it's the same citizenry that last year sent a very clear message in the elections that we don't trust you, even as political parties. Here you've got foundations that have got the interest of the society at heart, coming up and say, let's avoid a situation where we might end up with armed conflicts. Let's actually...
Which is the last thing we want, yes.
The last thing we want.
Course.
I mean, all those, heroes whose, where these foundations are named under, were actually pursuing peace, So how do we then, as a country, on something that we could be able to sit around the table, gets, messed up right at the beginning?
We continue this conversation after the break. Again, the question is this really a citizen-led dialogue, or is it just government doing what they do in every election hearing? And it's not just the ANC, it's every single political party, and that's make promises to the people. Do stay tuned. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Talking About. I'm still in conversation with Dr. Percy Mahlati and Janet Jobson on looking ahead to, of course, the National Convention, but the national dialogue as a whole. Janet, I want to come to you. There's something interesting that Dr. Mahlati had mentioned, and of course that is that when you see the advertising or the promotion of this, it still has government emblems or logos to it. And I thought to myself, I mean, if this is meant to be a citizen dialogue, then why is it being sold as some sort of government event? I speak to people across the street, just people who are not maybe watching a lot of news. I'd like to think that they understand what the national dialogue is. And they say, well, what is a national dialogue? There again, you've kind of lost, and this is between government and its people, its voter base. You've lost that trust, you've lost that communication in actually understanding or telling the people that here's an opportunity for you to go ahead and speak to government with the issues that are facing your communities.
Yeah, I think the branding is just an example of how things have become government owned. We fought very, very hard to make the principled point that the National Dialogue should be its own brand and should be communicated entirely as its own thing. There should be no co-sponsorship, no co-branding. And this is particularly important because as we move into the broader National Dialogue process of meeting at community and ward level, if we are going to have municipalities putting their logos all over the National Dialogue just because they provided venues, it's going to really undermine the independence of the process and people's trust in it as a platform that isn't owned by government and that isn't ultimately giving power to those who already are in electoral, to politicians essentially at a local level. We really think that a national dialogue must be something that feels qualitatively different from any previous experience South African citizens have had. It's not an imbizo. It's not a public consultation process where government is just coming to tell people about what they're doing. It's about the people of South Africa building their own sense of ownership over the future and building a sense of local and sectoral and ultimately national buy-in to a project that we all commit to as South Africans. And I think that it's really important in order for that to happen, that the integrity of the process is protected. If it is just seen as sort of a random set of meetings, or it's just you speaking to government, it loses the potential it has to be transformative in how it empowers the agency of South African citizens to feel a deep sense of ownership over our future as a country. As Dr. Mahlati was saying, the elections showed us that, less than 40%, I think it was about 40% of eligible voters voted. We have a deep distrust in democracy. And this needs to be a platform that people can really get behind and feel like their voice matters. And that's got to be a principle that we protect at all costs.
Dr. Mahlati, what we saw earlier on today's statements are coming from AfriForum and Solidarity. And of course, there's always huge question marks when it comes to them, because obviously what we saw AfriForum do at the United States of America, and what they have called this is they've called this a quote-unquote ANC-led dialogue. We've seen political parties within the GNU, and I'm going to mention the Freedom Front Plus and the Democratic Alliance, they've pulled out of this national dialogue. We, of course, had the opposition, the MK Party and the EFF, saying that they will not attend this national dialogue. Again, when somebody mentions ANC-led dialogue, of course, the first thing you do is you, of course, put a government stamp to that. The fact that this is being driven by the government, if you're a citizen on the ground, you kind of feel that your voice may be either muted or honestly not taken serious when it comes to dialogues like this, especially when we're in a situation in the country where unemployment is high and that that sense of trust is slowly, some may say, has already gone in terms of citizen and government.
Maybe let me start by, picking up the point that Janet raised about the last year's elections. Of the 60% that did not vote but had indicated their intention to vote, the Public Affairs Research Institute has shown that of that 60%, that did not vote, 70% of that are people below 35 years of age. So you can see the danger that our democracy is in, that the people that are set to inherit this country going forward actually don't feel anything about this democracy. That's a problem. And those are people that have hit hard by the unemployment in this country. Now, let me get to the question that you raised. Yes, I saw the statements that, of course, the DA said they're pulling out of the national dialogue.
And they were quite early in saying
it was quite early, and it was for political reasons.
Yes.
I don't think it had anything to do with the principles that underlie the dialogue.
Sure.
But also the challenge you have is that how do you pull out of something you never signed into? I think that, to me, is a bit of a challenge. But let's get to AfriForum Solidarity. The national dialogue should actually be a stage to debate and engage and deal with the challenges that they decided to take to the United States. I'm not sure whether those 49 families that went to the US are still happy. Because some of us feel that they were just used as pawn, in the process. But South Africans have shown their resilience. Fortunately, I think I'm of the age that can talk a lot about the experiences before 94,
yes.
where I even lost some of my friends, on the hands of the security police. So it's incumbent on us to actually not do things that we go back, there. The national dialogue creates a platform for everybody so that we can be able to say, look, let's put our differences aside. How do we actually see the future and path of this country, going in there? Matters of education, matters of health, economy, and all that. As I was coming here, I was listening on radio, a discussion about identity politics. Yes. Actually going to levels that I never thought. Those are the kinds of things that we need to do. The one about allegations of ANC is very far from the truth. There has been no ANC influence on the process or not. And quite clearly, and I really applaud the foundations, because they were clear from the word go that there will neither be any, in fact, it was moved by civil society,
yes. Yeah.
that this must not be government-led, must not be political party-led. The last thing I want to say is that you've got these foundations that have worked together for more than a year in a very cohesive, collective manner, yet they come from come from totally different ideological,
take the FW de Klerk Foundation, for
and
example.
The Biko Foundation.
Yes, I mean,
whoever thought that
it's oil and water.
Exactly.
Clearly, yeah.
Whoever thought those two could sit around the table and work so constructively for the future of this country. That is what we really need to exploit, so that we can be able to then say, we are mature about the need for this country. This country is not about the future of any political party. No. This national dialogue is about the future of this country. That is why, even right at the beginning of the sectors that were identified to be involved, political parties, the state, parliament, everybody, farm workers, farm organizations, big business, unions and all that, all coming together on one playing field, so that people could be able to share their experiences. I don't see anything wrong, with that. It's just unfortunate then that there's been disparate measures for reasons that we do not know, that some people felt that they must hijack the process. But I'm happy that the foundations have actually stood strong to say, these were the principles, this is what we promise society. We're not going to shift away from that.
Janet, an interesting point Dr. Mahlati had brought up. For example, before AfriForum went to the United States, here was a perfect opportunity for them to address government, to address certain political parties with regards to this claim that the Afrikaner community was being treated unfairly. And then, of course, Donald Trump, who latches on to anything sensational, we've seen that, saying that there's a white genocide that is happening in South Africa, especially to the Afrikaner community. Unfortunately, when you have certain political parties, certain lobby groups, certain civil societies, groups within civil societies pulling out, this really does not make any, or does not allow for the space for any chance, like Dr. Mahlati said, mature conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the national dialogue would have been a space and possibly still could be rescued and made into a space where we can have the kinds of conversations we need to have. Just on pure evidence basis, much of what AfriForum and Solidarity Movement have claimed about the persecution of Afrikaners is incorrect. But there's something they're feeling very deeply about, and there's something that their community is feeling very deeply, and that needs to be engaged in conversation. We need to be working towards finding each other as South Africans and building relationships that can overcome the wounds of our past. I think a lot of the reality of our society is we're very divided and we're very alienated from each other. And so part of what a project like the National Dialogue could do is to create the opportunity for us to actually meet each other as South Africans, to get to know each other as South Africans, as human beings and citizens. And then to work on these very challenging issues in a way that brings the wisdom and the genius of the full country to play. And in a sense, what we were hoping the outcome to be, a social compact or a people's pact, really to be morally binding for the next 30 years, to really be able to produce something out of all of these conversations and dialogues that says this is what the people of South Africa want, this is the future that they are dreaming of. And I think, there's huge opportunities for it to be an all of society conversation. One of the conversations was, how do you get every school child in the country to participate in some way? Is that grade 1s drawing pictures of the South Africa they want? Is it grade 12s writing essays about the South Africa they want? We need to have an all of society, all of citizenry engagement in this process. And that's really something we're going to continue fighting for as the foundations. We think it's absolutely fundamental because we need opportunities to find each other as South Africans and to have these very tough conversations.
After the break, my conversation with Janet Jobson and Dr. Percy Mahlati continues after the break. Do stay tuned. Okay, welcome back to Talking Point. Dr. Mahlati, I want to come to you. So there have been talks that this is going to be some sort of CODESA-led model for this national dialogue. And I know you've lived long enough to see the transition from that CODESA into a democracy. When I first heard it, I thought, come on, surely, we're 31 years into democracy. Why do we need something that even resembles a sort of conference that was like that? The times are completely different. What we saw in the 1990s and what we're seeing now in the 2020s are completely different. I want you to get your take on that because you've seen it all, you've experienced it all. Is this really a model that will sell to the citizens of this country?
Well, I think the dialogue as it has, national dialogue has been conceptualized, has already sold to society. The difference with this versus CODESA, remember CODESA at that time, I think we're all hot under the collar. We're fresh, actually we're still in the throes of armed conflict. You will recall that CODESA 1 collapsed because of a massacre in Boipatong. Yes. So there was a lot of blood on the streets. We're very hopeful that we would then be able to build a country, that would be able to reflect the aspirations of all in society. However, after 30 years, we still have groups like, AfriForum, whatever, feeling that. So there is something that we must actually, that is underlying that we must actually scratch and identify and deal with. The other major difference is that with CODESA, it was political parties talking there. It was not South African society that speaking.
Yes, I can remember.
Of course, political parties that were saying they are representing sections of society. And we've seen over the recent, history, what political parties will say they represent certain sections of society, get to parliament and adopt policies that are different from what they were mandated to do. We cannot live with a country like that. We know that there is a lot of dissatisfaction on the streets. The crime rates are so high. We have to take the responsibility to really deal with the situation. Otherwise, we're going to end up with armed conflict. Every day in the news, you actually see South Africans going out to hospitals, clinics, pulling out people that they think, are not of South African origin. We cannot allow such things to happen. And, by going there, shoot rubber bullets, it does not address the underlying problems. That is a symptom. There's an underlying problem. So that is why the national dialogue is far and wide. And the nice thing is that the foundations have said were not prescriptive as to what would be discussed. What should be discussed should actually be coming deep from the heart of each and every community, each and every sector, so that the product that comes up is truly South African. And various elements of South Africans' society would be able to take responsibility for the implementation of the recommendations that will be embodied in that in that social compact.
I want to come to you, Janet, and of course the foundation that you represent, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was chaired by the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu. His aim was reconciliation. When we see CODESA in parts was meant to be a sort of reconciliatory workshop leading up to democracy. We see now in South Africa, Dr. Mahlati mentioned it, where foreign nationals are being taken out by certain groups from hospitals. We then have, of course, just last week, 2 incidents of racial abuse. One, of course, coming back from a past post, Sports Minister Gayton McKenzie using a derogatory language against Black African citizens. And then, of course, we have the podcasters who, of course, made derogatory comments against colored people. Reconciliation, as much as we want to hold on to it still being something that South Africans have within them, when you see incidents like this, I mean, this is a national dialogue that can allow for it to happen, isn't it? But still, there's still so much of underlying issues that us as South Africans are dealing with, and one of them is still the ills of racism.
Absolutely, and I think we are living with the wounds of apartheid still, and we're living with those wounds very deeply in the structures of our economy and our society, but also very deeply in our identities and in the ways we engage. You know, the South African Reconciliation Barometer that came out last year showed that while most South Africans have interacted with people of different races, only about 30% had socialized or had friends and socialized with people of different racial groups. So it shows that we're still very divided. And that means that there's still a lot of groupthink within our communities. And so really what the National Dialogue aims to be is a platform for a different kind of engagement than you would normally have. And, you know, we work quite extensively with the legacy of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And what the TRC did was it created an opportunity for South Africans to bear witness to the worst parts of apartheid brutality. But what it didn't have the capacity to do, and it didn't have the mandate to do, was then to continue the conversation about what it means to be an ordinary South African living in a society that was characterized by hundreds of years of a crime against humanity. Yes. How do we step into a new South Africa in a really powerful way? How do we find each other in new ways? And one of the aspects of the National Dialogue that was being explored is in what ways can we bring a trauma-informed approach? In what ways can the dialogues themselves be sites of healing? Because we do see many of the ills of society come from this deep woundedness. We see an incredibly high alcoholism rate and binge drinking rate in South Africa, which fuels enormous amounts of gender-based violence. And a lot of that has to do with how people are feeling about themselves, whether they feel they matter as a person in this country. And that has both long legacies in the past and then deep legacies in our current situation of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. And I think the reason I make this point is that one of our major concerns was that there was not sufficient planning for how the broader national dialogue would roll out. Because if we're going to have the kind of conversation that allows us to surface this woundedness and allows us to work with it, we're going to need expert facilitators in place. And there, at this point, has not been a plan for how do we find and train the 750 people that can act as facilitators in local communities, so that it's not just a process of complaining about government, so that it's not just a process of grievances, but also a powerful and empowering experience of what it means to be a full citizen in a country like this and what it means to find each other across these divides. That's really important, some people may call it the soft work, but that's really fundamental work to an initiative like the National Dialogue. And that's why we really need extensive planning. We need detailed training. We need an effective process to be undertaken. And that's why rushing it is such a bad idea.
We've got 2 minutes, Dr. Mahlati, and I'm going to ask you to be brief. I know it's going to be difficult. There's something important Janet brings up in that still many South Africans are feeling the wounds of apartheid. And here's where I feel this national dialogue needed to include the mama who is still in the rural areas who cannot access clinics because the roads are bad. And I'm talking specifically in the Eastern Cape as one example. The mama in the township or the baba in the township who can't access basic amenities as per enshrined in the Constitution because there is a high cost of transport and the facilities don't allow for that to happen. If that's not addressed, then what's the point of this national dialogue?
Well, that is why in the thinking there was a view that the dialogue commences. Of course, people have been dialoguing.
Yes.
But it commences formally. There are major issues that come up from those sectoral and committee, dialogues, and some strong pointers come up on certain areas. You can't say wait until 12 months.
Yes.
That is why then there was an accommodation for an interministerial committee so that it could pick up those things and be able to then, make sure that there is a fast implementation. In any way, some people are asking to say, but those are things that government would have been elected for. It basically means that there are certain things that would actually have to be done. You don't have to wait until the dialogue is over to enforce accountability.
Yes.
You don't wait for the dialogue to be over to actually make sure that people face consequences for wrongdoing. Because you'll find that for those roads that are not navigable, there were budgets that were put, but they cannot be traced where they are. So all those things actually have to be taken up. But it becomes important that we actually rejig our vision going forward. And learning from the experiences, that we have. So this dialogue is really not a talk shop. That is why in the documents, it actually says work a new vision and an associated implementation plan. Because for me, I simplify and say there are 4 areas of implementation: our legislation, our constitution. Constitution has been amended more than 20 times already, You've got government that must actually do what it is mandated to do. It gets budget votes, from parliament to do the work. Then you've got communities. The breakdown of family structure is alarming in this country. So many young people, growing without, parents, and all that. Increasing number of children in the street and all that. And then you've got sectors, your business sectors, professional sectors. I belong to a professional sector. What responsibilities do we have to society as professionals besides just having say, I've actually achieved
it. Dr. Mahlati, I have to stop you because we have to go to the break.
Yes.
We are going to wrap up the conversation. What will be the future beyond this national dialogue once, of course, everything is completed? To stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. Janet, I want to start off with you for this segment. Honesty. Dr. Mahlati mentioned that honesty needs to come from this. Now, even though there's going to be this national dialogue, and we'd like to hope that it could still have a citizen-led approach, whatever changes that are going to happen is going to come from legislative decisions. Then enters government, then enters parliament, then enters the question, can we still have that honesty if this still has to go through legislation?
I think what's really important is that while there will certainly be major aspects identified in the national dialogue that belong to government, part of the way we conceptualize it is that it's an opportunity for all of society to take responsibility for society. So we need to really understand it as an opportunity at a local level for businesses and civil society and local groups to develop their own action plans, community action plans out of these dialogues, and to build sectoral action plans out of the sectoral dialogues, while at the same time feeding these very critical themes and issues into the national process. And then we have to find a way for this compact to really be binding in some way. It's very difficult to make it legally binding, but it should be morally binding. It should be that all governments over the next 30 years understand this to be the compact and this plan that the people of South Africa have pulled together. And we'll be doing everything we can to really build a sense of that real moral backbone that belongs to this national dialogue process, so that it's understood and followed through on as a process that was the people of South Africa making their voices heard.
Dr. Mahlati, I want to get your take on this. Honesty, because I think it's about time everyone or every South African has a sense of honesty. And one of the honesty aspects that the citizens want is that from government, because if you speak to citizens, the question, the complete, if you ask them, do you trust government? Do you believe what government's going to do? Their answer is going to be no. 31 years has proven that. What is your take on it?
Well, I think it's important that we understand that we are here because of a failure of leadership across the board. We've actually had national leadership over the years that has taken its eye off the ball. And we've got leadership in civil society that has failed to hold those who are in office accountable. So we've got to find a mechanism of ensuring that accountability is at the center. You cannot be accountable if you are not honest. You cannot,
Yes.
you know. So I think it's going to be important to come up with mechanism of even monitoring that compact that is going to come out to say, is it being implemented properly or not? Who knows, maybe we might actually come out of the dialogue saying that, no, our electoral system is actually the problem. There are many, things that people are talking about. So it would be very important, really. The reason that government, in form of a government and parliament and parties would be there is because they cannot stand outside and say, no, you were deciding on our behalf.
Yes.
They've got to be there and be decision makers together with society.
Janet, I want to get closing comments from you. Let's try and at least sell this in a positive manner. I know we've been speaking, and a lot of it has been, is there a question mark put to the national dialogue? But there's one thing about us as South Africans, we try to find the positivity, we try to find the optimism in everything in our country, whether it comes from sports, whether it comes from the arts field. Can we still see a positive aspect from this national dialogue, that in the next 5 to 10 years, the future generations have a strong country that they can build from?
Absolutely. We are incredibly firm believers in the national dialogue as it was conceptualized on the basic principles of being citizen-led and being meaningful as a platform of engagement. I think it's up to the people of South Africa to really ensure that that is what the process becomes. We've obviously had to withdraw from this convention because of the issues we spoke about earlier, but we're very committed to the idea of the national dialogue. We're going to be regrouping as the foundations to explore what is it we can do to try and get this process back on track, back to the principles that were agreed at the outset, because it is fundamentally important. I love what you said about South Africans being optimistic. In my work facilitating many dialogues, what I have found is that one thing that unites all South Africans is we really want this place to work. Across all racial groups, across all classes, what we want is for South Africa to work. And this is an opportunity for all of us to pull together in the same direction to make that happen. And we'll be doing everything we can as the foundations to get this back on track. And we hope that the citizens of South Africa will join us in doing so.
Dr. Mahlati, we've got unemployment that is sitting quite high. We've got a GDP that we really want to see go beyond 1%. Those are the things, of course, holding us back. If we have a healthy economy, we're going to have a healthy nation. Your closing comments on this, Dr. Mahlati. Can we see this country moving in the right direction through these dialogues, but can we also see it transferring into a strong economy. And for that to happen, government needs to play their parts, the private sector needs to play their parts. And I think only then we may just see the citizens saying we're willing to help contribute even further towards a stronger economy and a stronger country.
Yes, I must say that the Strategic Dialogue Group is firmly anchored in the national dialogue and will do everything that we can to advance whatever, is promoting our country. There is no way we can really, develop as a country if we do not attend to our economic challenges. Yes. And we believe that there is a lot of goodwill. Yes, there will be areas where there are differences and all that, but if we are all united by the same vision going forward, which is what the national dialogue is actually trying to do, we're going to remain there. We're going to make sure that we do all in our power to make sure that the national dialogue succeeds.
Janet, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us here on Talking Point on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
Thanks so much.
That's Janet Jobson. She is the CEO of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation. Dr. Mahlati, thank you so much for making the time and visiting us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's Dr. Percy Mahlati. He's the Secretary of the Strategic Dialogue Group. Well, that's all we have for you here on Talking Point. If you have missed this episode, it will be available on our YouTube channel, Hilaal TV. From myself, Faraz Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.